All right, everybody, welcome to our final project, Project 3, Transforming the System, Persuasive Argument. So this is going to be the writing project that I think is most familiar to us. When we started out with the project proposal, it's a very new thing to wrap your head around. The annotated bibliography, again, a huge new format of academic writing. But now that we are composing an argument where we're supporting our stance, I think we're back into some more familiar territory. So we're getting ready to just jump into this project. Let's take a look at first about the purpose. So what is persuasive writing and how will our arguments transform the system? As you listen along, I encourage you to jot down notes, not only of what I'm saying, but ideas that come to mind for you as you're beginning to think about moving from research to argument. Okay, so ready to listen and take notes. For this third and final project, we will create a persuasive argument that expresses our argument about how to solve problems or transform systems surrounding whatever our chosen individual topics are. The same topic that we've been using for all that research that we did. A persuasive argument will seek to entice the audience's interest and convince them that your problem is serious and inspire them to adopt solutions and changes that you propose. Persuasion requires you as a writer to make intentional choices within that rhetorical situation. So remember the relationship between the purpose, the audience, the context, the style of the source. So you have to make those intentional choices, deploy your rhetorical appeals. So use those appeals to eat those pathos and logos, and organize your argument for clarity, effectiveness, and impact. So if your argument is clear, easy to follow, and influential, you're going to have a better shot at persuading that eventual audience. Persuasive writing asks the writer to really enter into that relationship with the audience, the topic, and the larger context. As you might recall from chapter 3, where we talked about elevating your personal opinion to the status of an academic argument, persuasive writing argues for the author's point of view, so that's you're the author, by using logical patterns of reasoning. That's the logos that you're going to be using, such as evaluating the merits or the disadvantages of something. So when you're explaining why something is such a problem, or when you're explaining why a solution is valuable, so you're evaluating the merits and the disadvantages. You're arguing for a position within a debate. So hopefully you have found multiple viewpoints that talk about different possible solutions, and maybe you are choosing the best one, or you are synthesizing them together and saying, you know, these are our options. Here's how we can make this real, how we can put this into real life practice. Or maybe you're coming up with a debate about maybe there are sources out here who are saying that this isn't such a big problem, and you're really saying it is a big problem. Here's how to solve it. Speculating about the consequences of specific circumstances. So remember, that's your analysis commentary, the impact. It requires critical thinking and creative thinking to speculate about how this proposed solution will actually make changes, transformations, and long-term effects. And then proposing solutions to ongoing problems is also a pattern of reasoning. In addition, persuasive writing typically engages with a counterpoint or alternative views in order to strengthen your own credibility. We will learn persuasive techniques, so we'll have some lessons and practices for organizing an argument into an intentional influential flow to help clarify what this topic is and who it impacts, to help critique the harmful effects of the problem, and to help encourage the audience to shift their beliefs, values, and actions toward real-world changes. Starting with a solution-oriented thesis, we will focus the purpose of our argument towards solutions and avoid going into like a history report about the problems. As you guys have probably noticed throughout your research, the problems are well documented. There's no shortage of discussion there, but often there is a shortage of discussion in solutions. So the purpose of this argument is solution oriented, not a history report about the problems and why they're important. The bulk of the essay or speech, presentation, pamphlet, whatever your composition will be, the bulk of it should be directed toward the solution. We will develop our argument with paragraphs or chunks that guide the audience through, first of all, your personal connection with the topic, and then outward towards the larger social and political impacts to show why your argument is so valuable on a personal level and a political level. Along the way, you will share evidence from the research, borrowing the authority and the expertise of those credible sources to help elevate your own opinions, your own wishes, your own hopes into the status of a more credible argument. At each step in the discussion, you'll be using critical thinking to expose the values and the judgments that are hidden throughout the conversation. So that's when you look at a piece of evidence, you look at an example, and you use that deep thinking to say how that evidence shows certain cultural norms, expectations, values, assumptions, problems. So really reading between the lines and diving beneath the surface of the ideas. And then also using critical thinking to imagine the possibilities that might emerge when your proposed solutions are taken into action. So using that, predicting, thinking about the cause and effect, the consequences, sort of avoiding the slippery slope, avoiding the hasty generalization, but really showing the audience, if we take my proposal into account, my solutions that I'm telling you to do, this is the kind of future that we're looking at. So now that you have evaluated a diverse range of sources, you are prepared to engage in that conversation or that discourse that circulates around your fall 2025 research topic. You'll have a deeper, more focused, and more complex understanding of the topic so that you can reevaluate your own pre-existing bias, assumption, and plan a more credible, persuasive argument. So talking about persuasive writing, the gist of the situation is that we are just trying to really convince the audience to take our problem seriously, to see the issue through our perspective. So we're revealing to them the deeper underlying meanings, themes, patterns that we noticed. And we're just trying to convince them that our solutions will lead to something more valuable. And this could be small things. So addressing your audience on a personal level. If they shift their mindset, their attitude, their individual life might improve in some way. Or this can be much larger, and we could be saying if government leaders shift their values and their understandings, society as a whole could be much better. So however we're looking at our personal topic, anything from the individual level to social, cultural level to larger systemic structures, either way. So that's persuasion. Next we'll look, it's very closely tied together, how will our arguments like transform the system? Through research, a lot of us have really begun to see larger patterns and larger structures, like values that are normalized by social expectations that are then codified into laws or legal structures, that kind of create this web of problems that surround the topic. It's not just here's the problem, here's the solution. It's like the problems are converging from all different areas of social experience. So over these next 5 weeks, you're going to have the chance to sort of untangle some of that web, retrace the fault line, and that does mean rereading your research sources. This is why it's so important to save, annotate, take notes, because even now when we're getting into the argument, you will be rereading those sources. So to sort of like retrace all the different problems and address them, pick out all the different solutions that you may have noticed and evaluate them. As you might recall from Chapter 2, our critical thinking toolbox, one of the major benefits for critical thinking is an opportunity for transformation, and this can come through personal empowerment and or social change. So we're going to use this final argument to sort of put those pieces into motion, asking those invested communities to make actual changes. At the highest level, we really want to reach a position where our education prepares us to take meaningful actions toward shaping and changing socially constructed themes that impact our lives. And since we all chose a topic that impacts us directly or has a direct impact on our lives, here's an opportunity to practice that kind of pushback, or that kind of using reading, writing, and critical thinking for larger influence. So Project 3 is all about convincing the reader to take real-world action towards solving the problem. In many ways, this, for most of us, is really just an academic exercise where we practice persuasive, evidence-based arguments in the classroom environment. But we do have the opportunity, if you wish, to create an authentic and publishable work that you can share with a wider audience. You have the option here to think beyond the essay format, to publish your argument as a speech, a video, a pamphlet, a letter, a web page, a news or magazine article, etc. And by thinking beyond the essay to thinking towards addressing an actual audience helps us tailor that argument toward a specific audience and create something that we might be able to share with them. It puts us in a position where we could have the potential to get our argument in front of readers, viewers, and listeners who might actually begin to shift their approach to the topic, their beliefs, their values, their actions. So for some of us, we already have an idea about where we would wish to share this argument online, if we want to submit it to a local magazine or newspaper, if we want to send this letter to a representative or some form of leadership. So for some of us, we already have these ideas in mind. For others of us, this imagined audience is never literally going to see the work, but the practice of tailoring this argument for specific outcomes to a specific audience will equip us with the strategies and skills to one day influence real audiences toward transformation. For example, outside of college, strong persuasive arguments can help us influence audiences such as hiring committees when we're ready to really launch into the next level of our career. Judges and juries, if you ever find yourself in a position where you may need to influence people in a serious manner. Landlords, investors, community or local governing bodies, and even really just friends and family. So having the ability to garner up research and evidence and leverage that in order to persuade an audience to adopt your view towards an issue is really invaluable beyond the classroom. So that's the purpose, why we're writing this argument, to put all of our persuasive techniques into play and like leverage that toward change or influence. All right, that was a lot. Let's take a break. Hopefully we wrote down a few things. I am also asking everybody to leave at least one annotation into the prompt so that we can talk about it together as a class. So let's move on to the prompt itself. And as always, it's going to have the assignment and then like a breakdown of all the ingredients. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Okay, so the prompt itself. Transforming the system, persuasive argument. Here we go. In 1,200 to 2,000 words, so there's a big range here, and this is to sort of support the many types of genres and media that might be coming my way. So here's our word limit. Compose a thesis-driven argument that advocates for solutions and changes for your chosen topic. So remember, solution-oriented. We are not dwelling upon the problems. That's the context. That's the background. The argument is solution-oriented. Develop your argument with clearly focused paragraphs or chunks that are organized in a cohesive flow, so one after the other, in like a way that makes sense. Incorporate persuasive elements with rhetorical sensitivity without fallacy or manipulation. Contextualize and support your argument with direct evidence from at least 6 sources, including alternate or opposing views. Demonstrate critical thinking and sound reasoning by analyzing the underlying assumptions and extended consequences of your own ideas and the ideas that you bring in from research. The argument can be presented in any format, ranging from an essay, an investigative report with like subheadings, the script for a mock debate or a mock discussion forum. If you want to like get creative, get theatrical. The script for a speech, a pitch, or a presentation. And you can include slides along with that if you want to do a presentation, speech or pitch. A letter, a magazine article or web blog, a pamphlet of resources. The sky is really the limit here, as long as the argument is well organized, persuasive, contextualized with research, analytic, so thinking about the underlying assumptions and the long-term consequences, and as long as all evidence is attributed, embedded, tagged, and cited in MLA standards. So there's the prompt itself. That's your anchor. And we have a lot of like really heavy keywords. And I know if any of us have a lot of experience with writing essays in school, one thing we're always told is look at the keywords of the prompt to dig into how to understand the expectations. So below, we have kind of like the menu or the ingredients for each part of the assignment. So we have our thesis statement, and since this is a complex argument, we will be using a 3-part thesis statement. So if you're already familiar with this, that's really great. If you're not, pretty much we just have to think about the thesis statement as more than a sentence. Instead, it's several sentences. It's like the second half of your intro paragraph, basically, is a long thesis statement. Since the argument connects to a complex, ongoing discourse amongst multiple viewpoints, as opposed to just a simplified opinion and supporting reasons, we need a thesis statement that can hold together the many threads of the argument into a cohesive body. A complex thesis will give your argument clarity and focus and help you avoid tangents and disconnected claims. The three-part thesis statement consists of several sentences that serve as a roadmap to the complete argument. And throughout the argument, you will continually link back to this thesis statement. So this is how it works. The three parts are what, how, and why. For this essay, that means what solution or transformation are you advocating for? We want to really use powerful language to assert what views, beliefs, questions, or actions you want the audience to take away from the argument. This is the purpose of your argument. We will link back to this part of the thesis in each claim. So remember, paragraphs or chunks need to start with like claim, evidence, analysis. Each claim will really help to develop this solution, transformation, or change. It will really help focus the reader towards solution-oriented thinking. So we have the what, then we have the how. So how does this solution fit within the larger discussion? How are you going to contextualize your argument? So we want to give a preview of how this solution solves problems that are specific to the invested community members or the invested voices that you've been introduced to during research. Giving a preview of how the solution is maybe similar to what has already been proposed or how it is different to what has already been proposed. So giving context for how does your voice that you're introducing here fit within the larger conversation. You will continually tie back to this part of the thesis when you introduce the evidence that supports each paragraph or each chunk of your argument. So right now you're giving a roadmap to the kinds of evidence that you're going to pull from, and throughout the argument you'll be tying us back to this aspect. And then finally, the why. So why is this argument, why is this solution important for specific context areas? Context areas gave people a little bit of trouble during Project 1 and Project 2, and it's because for those of us who didn't watch the lecture. So go back and watch that if you still need to. Hard to succeed well without taking in the learning materials. So giving a preview of how this solution, transformation, or change is going to impact specific communities, groups, or like aspects of life. Specify how this solution is going to influence and change conditions, norms, values, experiences, ideals, etc. So how is it going to change something related to gender, ethnicity, ability, wealth, economy, ecology, symbolisms, ecology, society, culture, politics, history, aesthetics, and or, so remember, that's like 12, that's a dozen context lenses that are available to us. Everyone's really only needing to focus on 2 or 3 lenses, so don't get overwhelmed, don't get carried away. Focus on the main changes. And when you outline this why, you will connect back to this throughout the argument in your analysis commentary for each paragraph or each chunk. You'll be stitching everything back to the thesis. So that's why we need a big, complex, detailed thesis statement that really holds together the whole argument. And we will practice this. This isn't like, okay, here's how it's done, go and do it. Like, well, as we do with everything, we'll practice. So that's a huge part of your, the expectations here. Well-developed paragraph chunks. Just remembering that academic structure of claim, evidence, analysis. So really developing the argument with focused claims that help to clarify what your topic is, help to share why you're connected to this topic, help to explain the significance and the urgency of the problem, and help to address alternate views or opposing views, and most importantly, proposing solutions and alternatives to the situation that's going on right now. So that's kind of like a little outline too of the kinds of paragraphs you may want to include. But each paragraph or each chunk needs to begin with a very clear and focused claim, letting us know, okay, what's the point of this part of the discussion? What's the point of this part of the discussion? Once you tell us the point or the idea that you want to get across, you need to support that claim with direct evidence in MLA format that connects your argument to existing viewpoints and larger conversations. Throughout the argument, you're going to need to bring in at least 6 sources, and whenever possible, it will be good to synthesize multiple sources to illustrate how your own argument is joining into a little discussion. So if you're sharing your personal connection to the topic, you might bring in, this is how I'm connected to the topic. I'm not alone in this. Other people are also connected to this topic, either similar to me or different from me. If you're talking about the urgency of the problem, then you might say something like, multiple sources are talking about this, and you're joining into that conversation. So it can help you have a little bit more of a sophisticated argument when you're synthesizing multiple sources within each paragraph or chunk. So after the claim, after the evidence, you always need analysis. Analyzing the significance of each claim. So using critical thinking to explicate that underlying values, the norms, the expectations, the ideals that are embedded in this way of thinking, and then also to analyze the extended consequences. So what will be the effects or the outcomes from this way of thinking? Bringing in analysis for the ideas you propose and the ideas that you borrow through research. So remember, each chunk needs to begin and end with your critical thinking voice, your claim and your analysis. It needs to be supported in the middle by context from research, borrowing the authority of experts, people with lived experience, etc. So well-developed paragraph chunks. Persuasive techniques and rhetorical sensitivity. So remembering the purpose of this argument is to be persuasive, to connect with your audience, to influence their beliefs, actions, ideas, etc. The best way to do this is to start with an audience in mind. Address a specific audience by acknowledging the relevant community or the relevant communities who are invested in your topic. Make your purpose clear with call to action statements like throughout the argument that specifically suggest how you expect your audience to respond. So tell them what to do. Integrate rhetorical appeals to really influence the audience's full range of trust, emotion, and intellect. And that's the ethos, pathos, and logos that we've talked about so many times throughout this semester. Incorporate various rhetorical modes to give your argument's approach variety and help connect with the audience in a deeper way. So include moments of narration where you're telling your own story or bringing in the stories from research. Patterns of development that connect with this include autobiography, reflection. So as I reflect on this moment from the past, I've come to realize this bigger picture. Chronological order, so telling things in the order that they happened, using vivid descriptions, and sharing the social or political significance of individual experiences. So storytelling will be, I think, an effective way to connect with your audience. explication. So this is like the academic way of saying explanation. Explaining key ideas, and you can use patterns of development like defining terms, classifying like categories, comparing and contrasting, analyzing cause and effect relationships, and really helping the audience recognize larger patterns or larger systems at work here. And then persuasion, of course, is the number one. This is where we want to convince our audience to accept your views, and your views can be produced in patterns of reasoning that include evaluating. So evaluating the dangers of something that's harmful, evaluating the benefits of something that is helpful, evaluating the merits or the flaws of specific arguments that you're bringing in, especially when you're talking about the counterpoint or the opposing view that you want to refute, or especially when you are gathering solutions that are already being advocated for and you want to amplify those. You want to talk about the values that lift them up, the consequences that we expect to find from that. So that's like telling a story, explaining ideas, and being persuasive. So that's persuasive techniques, rhetorical sensitivity, and then finally MLA formatting criteria, and we will practice these things. So you are welcome to compose your work in any kind of genre that you want. If you're doing an essay, we're going to want to see that in MLA format. So if you are doing an academic essay, or if you're turning in written materials like the script to a speech or a presentation, or a report with like subheadings and things like that, remember the basics. So plain black size 12 font. You want the header, the heading, the title, indented paragraphs, double spacing, subheadings, etc. If you want to do something more creative, like a magazine article, web page, a pamphlet, a slide presentation, a mock discussion, or anything else that's creative, you can choose fonts, styles, images, text boxes, color, etc. that really impacts the audience's attention and their response to your argument. Just make sure that it is legible and that we can understand the flow. So what order do we read it in? The criteria for integrating your evidence is much more strict, and everybody will follow this for all genres and all medias. So when we talk about the research that we're bringing in, we need to accurately attribute the title and the author. So referring to research in the present tense to indicate that it's an ongoing discussion. Referring to authors by their full name or their last name only, or if it's a corporation or a username, we never want to refer to authors by their first name only. When we refer to websites, journals, books, or artworks, we want to use italics. And then when we refer to those individual web pages, articles, chapters, or discussion threads, we want to use quote marks. And then also noticing the small details like punctuation, like commas and periods go inside the quotation mark. Anytime we bring in evidence, we want to embed that evidence into our own sentences. We don't want to see stand-alone quotes. We don't want to see what we call drag and drop quoting. Always tuck that quote into embedding phrases in your own language. You can use just simple phrases like, according to this author or this source, or you can say like, this author argues, blah, blah, blah. But I'm also going to link us out to some more interesting options that can help us elevate the language of how we discuss our research. Whenever possible, we want to synthesize multiple sources to add context to the discussion. So connecting when viewpoints are similar to one another, emphasizing when viewpoints contrast or disagree with one another. We always want to include accurate citation tags, and this is for any time we reference, summarize, paraphrase, or quote. We want to make sure to clarify what the source was and where these words are located in that source. Often this is a paragraph number. And you can review the Learn and Practice Guide for the annotated bibliography if you want to remember how to attribute and cite a variety of different media. And then at the end, we want to make sure that all of that research is shown in a Works Cited page. So this is for anything that you mention, summarize, or quote from. It needs to be on the list. This is for any information such as statistics, dates, financial numbers, percentages, likelihoods, probabilities, facts, all information. I don't know a lot about all of your guys' different topics, so help me, like you have to show your reader proof and evidence of any claim that you bring in, any photos, images, graphs, so anything that you're bringing in needs to appear on the list, and anytime you're using AI or Grammarly writing assistance, you gotta cite that as well. So remember, when you use AI and you bring in ideas from your AI discussion chat thing, that needs to be cited in parentheses, the prompt that you used, and followed up with your own commentary and ideas. Anytime you're using Grammarly and it significantly changes the word choice or the sentence structure of a sentence, that needs to be cited as well. Really giving transparency and clarity to distinguish what is my own authentic work as opposed to what I am getting from outside resources. Because as we've said before in the syllabus and in the academic integrity policy, I'm not grading the quality of the ideas that another person or machine has created. I'm grading and responding to and giving feedback to your writing. So I need to know the difference. Either that or it takes me 1,000 years to grade something because I don't know what to give feedback on and how suspicious I need to be. So just I'm making your job easier for you. I'm outlining all the ingredients to your research project right here, to your argument. So you make my job easier on me. Let me know when it's your voice and when it's the voice of another. So those are the ingredients, and then I just have a final reminder of writing as a discovery process. Remember, you are not expected to sit down today and have all the answers to solve these problems on your own. We're going to work through the next 5 weeks or so, probably like 3 weeks, and then we'll go to revising and editing. But we'll work through the next few weeks to review the research that you've done, to sort of like really give shape to what your takeaway is. Like, what's your takeaway from all this learning that you've done, and how do you want to express that to your audience? How do you want to teach your audience to see the issues through your own eyes, through your own point of view? How are we going to put those pieces together into a convincing flow, etc.? The writing process is meant to help you find your voice on the issue and help you connect with the ongoing conversation, so that you can speak authoritatively and persuasively about your own views and opinions within that context of the larger academic, social, and political discourse. So you are not expected to sit down today and know all the answers to all of this stuff. These next few weeks are going to be a process of reviewing, rethinking, discovering, and expressing your argument. All right, so that's it from me. This was a long one. But please, I look forward to seeing your annotations. I will respond as always, and I'll see you in the next one. It's a lot of me talking today because right after this, I think we have a lesson that we're doing. So I'll see you in there. Bye.